The Monkey is the latest film from Oz Perkins, the director of Longlegs, but The Monkey is a very, very different film.
For the longest time, there was nothing.
Oz, or Osgood Perkins, has kind of emerged as one of the leaders in the horror-esque genre, bringing out 2 films within the last 8 months, and the fact that he is able to shift so much stylistically and tonally between these 2 projects kind of cements him as one of the leaders within this genre. If you go into The Monkey expecting a super slow burn, hardcore, tense thriller of a horror, then you're probably going to be disappointed. You need to either enter into this film knowing what it is or just enter with an open mind. This film is equal parts horror and comedy, and to be perfectly honest, I was laughing out loud in pretty much every scene in a good way. It is an adaptation of a Stephen King short story, although the short story is much darker and more serious in tone. The film starts with a brief appearance from a character played by Adam Scott. Thank you, Adam Scott, for taking a break from riding that absolute high with Severance right now. And we see this character attempting to return the monkey, this essentially killer monkey toy. As we progress through the film, we spend almost all of our time with a character named Hal, who is Adam Scott's character's son. And Hal is played by 2 different actors at 2 different points in his life, Christian Convery and Theo James. And regardless of where he is in his life, he seems to be dealing with this killer monkey toy that his father tried so desperately to get rid of. We do get some shorter glimpses into the lives of some other characters, most notably Elijah Wood as this incredibly hyperbolized, best selling author of basically how to be a perfect father. Some more on this whole father angle in a minute. From the opening sequence of The Monkey, we have a pretty clear understanding of the tone that is being set for the rest of the film. It's a bit over the top in terms of its humor, its characters, and its kills. But it's important to note that Perkins is aware of this and he uses this self-awareness to his advantage, which is why the film does end up working. There's a pretty fine line when you're trying to almost simultaneously honor certain genre elements while also satirizing and hyperbolizing some of the most common genre tropes. And in order to do this successfully, you can't take yourself too seriously. So it's pretty nice to see Perkins do exactly that and understand this necessity, given that a lot of his previous work, I would say more so in The Blackcoat's Daughter, which was his largest project prior to Longlegs, he tends to explore the genre in a bit heavier and darker fashion. So this is a little bit different than those major projects of his in the past. In The Monkey, it feels like he's almost lifting a weight off of his own shoulders by leaning into these comedic aspects that have always, on some level, been intrinsically tied and almost inseparable from horror. That being said, Perkins isn't just crafting a comedy here. It is still somewhat serious beneath all of the laughs and the frequent absurdity. Specifically, I would say that The Monkey is quite self-referential when it comes to fatherly trauma and the fraught relationships that a son might have with his father and the ultimate ongoing long-term impact of this. At the end of the prologue, we hear a snippet of a voiceover from the film's narrator, Hal, more or less telling us that the film is a story about having a bunch of baggage more or less passed down from one's father. I touched on this in my Longlegs review, but Oz's relationship with his father was pretty fascinating on a number of levels. His dad, Anthony Perkins, was Norman Bates in Psycho, one of the most iconic killers of all time. And in Psycho 2, Oz played a younger version of Norman when he was only 9 years old. Oz has been pretty open, particularly in the last couple of years, about his relationship with his father and how he's still working through a lot of these feelings and the lingering impacts of basically watching his father struggle. The father son relationship goes even further than this, though. I'll try to keep this brief, but I do think that it is quite relevant to the project here. Basically, Anthony Perkins also had a fraught relationship with his father, who was also an actor and also named Osgood or Oz Perkins. Anthony spoke about how when he was very young, he actually remembers wishing that his father would die. And sadly, his father did die when he was only 5 years old. Fast forward to his own son, also Osgood, and his son having to watch Anthony struggle privately with his sexuality and overall mental health, and also die well before his time when Oz was only 18 years old. So it's not exactly a surprise that Perkins was drawn to this Stephen King story with some father son connections and childhood guilt, and Oz leaned into this even more than the original story. But back to the film. Our protagonist, Hal, is foiled by his twin brother, Bill, who both have very different ideas of what to do with the monkey, both as children, but also as adults. The fact that Hal and Bill are played by the same actor kind of reinforces this concept that Hal and Bill are metaphorically essentially two sides of the same person. We see this sort of push and pull between the two characters throughout the runtime, which really is a representation of this internal push and pull. There is a lot of repressed childhood trauma going on here. When it comes to the kills, there are a lot of them, and quite frankly, most of them are bound to elicit some gasps, some laughs on occasion, and a lot of, oh my god, what did we just see? There's definitely some kills that are reminiscent of a few in the Final Destination series, and Oz is definitely calling back to a number of different films. Compared to Longlegs, the monkey is less hyper stylized, particularly in the childhood scenes. There's some occasional choices that kind of add to the style. There's use of fisheye lens only on a couple occasions, and there's also some extreme low angle shots to show a childlike perspective and this imposing power that adults seem to have when we are so young. But still, for the most part, the camera work and the color palette is a bit more naturalistic than some of Perkins' other works. On a more serious note, Perkins uses the absurdity of the film to actually say something kind of interesting about death. He has spoken publicly again about how both of his parents died tragically and seemingly without rhyme or reason. Essentially, when death calls, we don't have any other choice but to answer. And by having some of these deaths in the film be so over the top and random, it's kind of his reflection on the inevitability of death and how we ultimately don't have a say when it's our time to go. He ends the monkey by calling back to some imagery that is referenced throughout the film, and I won't spoil anything. I think the ending will be a bit divisive, but it did actually really work for me. At the end of the day, The Monkey isn't Longlegs. It's not a slow burn thriller, it's a comedy horror with a lot of fatherly trauma and grief and self blame. So if that sounds like it might be up your alley, then I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Watch it if you can in a packed theater. It is a pretty fun ride. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe. A lot more videos coming. I'll be down in South by Southwest in a couple weeks watching some world premieres and reviewing those films. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, keep watching the videos when they come out. Thanks.